Tim Wood, Tony Pauline with you with another edition of the Essentially Sports DraftCast with Tony Pauline. Tony, uh, fast and furious already as the
Yes.
free agent frenzy begins and the draft movement already has begun with Maxx Crosby trade uh, and the Rams deal for McDuffie earlier in the week. Crazy days already.
And now free agency's open, and we've seen some major deals in free agency, which will fill some major holes for teams and also create voids for the teams that lose those free agents. So it's going to be interesting. It will have an impact on the NFL draft. And, we'll talk about, what we think is going to happen as far as free agency, how that'll impact the draft. And, you mentioned the Maxx Crosby trade. What do the Raiders do at this point in time?
It's getting crazy. It's getting crazy already, and it hasn't even the official signing period isn't even started. Uh, Also want to let you know, got an interview coming up. Paige DeMacos from the Draft Network. She will be joining us on this week's edition of the pod. Uh, some great topics to get with Paige on. A bona fide draft Nick like yourself. Let's get into the main topics of the week. Let's start with Maxx Crosby, Tony, and
Yeah.
just the ripple effect that this trade to the Ravens has created.
Well, I think it's a good trade by the Raiders. I mean, Maxx
Oh
Crosby's a
yeah.
terrific defensive end, but he's at the end of his career. The Raiders are obviously in a rebuild. They have a new head coach, an offensive-minded head coach. I don't think the Raiders are going to take a pass rusher early on to replace Maxx Crosby because they have so many needs on the offensive line. Obviously, they need. They're going to take Fernando Mendoza with the top pick of the draft. They have needs at receiver, so I still think it's going to be offensive heavy early in the draft for the Raiders, depending on who they sign in free agency. We got to remember that. And then from that point on, they will get a pass rusher in this draft. I think it's a good trade for the Raiders because not only did they pick up an extra first round pick this year and next year, but they trade Maxx Crosby in a year that's rich in pass rushers. So they don't have to take a pass rusher in the first round. They don't have to really take a pass rusher at the top of round two. They can wait and get a good player to potentially select Maxx Crosby, who was, oh, by the way, a fifth round pick later on in the draft. So I think that this was a terrific trade for the Raiders. I think it's, for the Ravens, they better get some short term results from Maxx Crosby real quick because, that team is aging in certain areas, as is Maxx Crosby. But good move by the Raiders as far as I'm concerned.
You in your latest mock have Carnell Tate going there. You think they'll take that pick and run with it with Tate?
Well, I mean, look who the head coach is, and the head coach was the offensive coordinator with the Seattle Seahawks, and they had a great uh, receiver from, by the way, Ohio State there, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, who helped them win a Super Bowl. Now, I don't have Carnell Tate there because he's from Ohio State, like JSN. I have him there because there's a need at receiver. I also have him there because I have Mekhi Lemon going 2 picks earlier to the LA Rams, even though he's rated below Carnell Tate on my draft board, because I think that Mekhi Lemon is a better fit for the Rams, which leaves the door open for Carnell Tate falling to the Raiders at pick number what is it? Pick number
14, right
13,
behind, right behind the Rams.
right? 14, which they acquired from the Ravens.
Yep. Uh, Other big news coming out while we're recording. Um, Kenneth Walker to the
Yeah.
to the Chiefs.
I mean, if you read my story earlier this week, or last week, I should say, at Essentially Sports, the Seahawks wanted to bring Walker back, but he was pricing himself out of that market. I don't know what the contract terms were for Kenneth Walker. I haven't seen them yet. But the fact is people talk about Jeremiah Love going to the Kansas City Chiefs. They don't need Jeremiah Love right with that ninth pick. Now they can concentrate on offensive line. Maybe take a Kenyon Sadiq. Maybe take a receiver with number 9. So it's a good signing by the Chiefs. I'm going to wait and see what the contract terms are, but they fill a need. And now as I said, with the Seattle Seahawks, They like Zach Charbonnet, who's coming off an injury, and they will look to add another sort of second tier running back either through the draft or free agency.
The other big move that you've reported a lot on, Alec
Yeah.
Pierce has actually re-upped, according to sources, has re-upped with the Colts on a 4-year, $116 million deal.
And if you read my reporting on Pierce, the Colts wanted him. The only way they were going to keep him was to make him a Godfather offer, a contract, or give him a Godfather contract, an offer he can't refuse. And that's exactly what happened before free agency opened. I had said that the number for Alec Pierce was going to be about $27 million per year. Turned out to be $29 million per year. Let's look at the guarantees. Somebody told me, and I did report this at the combine, when this whole mishmash between Daniel Jones wanting huge money and the Colts wanting Alec Pierce, they said to me, if I was Pierce agent and I was offered 4 years, $100 million with most of the guarantees in the first 3 years, I would take it. The big thing is everybody looks at the $116 million. Let's see where the guarantees are and where are the guarantees, because I would assume, I talk with his team and other people, most of those guarantees, the guaranteed money is going to be early on in the contract, which is probably one of the reasons why he decided to go back with the Colts. Never mind the overall value of the deal.
Absolutely. 29 million a year. Like you said, though, the guaranteed money not out yet, but it's got to be. It's got to be loaded.
Front loaded in the
Yep.
early part of the contract.
Let's see. Travis Kelce said he's coming back for a 14th season. Apparently, uh, Gary has been traded from the Packers to the Cowboys. Uh, does that shake up your draft thoughts at all in terms of the Cowboys?
No, not at all. I mean, it was a late round pick. I think this sort of ties in with Tua Tagovailoa, who just on Monday the Dolphins announced that they're going to make Tua a post June 1 cut. And as you saw with Rashan Gary, as you saw with Teron Johnson of the Buffalo Bills, what happens is these teams say that they're going to cut the player after, at the end of March or after June 1st, and then they garner interest from other teams. And, in the case of Rashan Gary, I think the Cowboys traded a fifth round pick and it got Gary in a sixth round pick. So rather than the team that really wants him and may hope to bring him in after he's cut and clears waivers, says, we'll give you a late round pick now and we'll take him. So it doesn't shake up the draft.
Sticking with the Dolphins, an in-division trade, the
Yeah.
Dolphins have traded Minka Fitzpatrick to the Jets. Uh, that kind of that'll change up the Jets' priorities a little bit with this draft.
Well, I don't think it changes their. Well, yeah, I guess. I think what it does is it takes Caleb Downs off the board at number two. They've already
Yeah.
filled that need. Again, go back to what I wrote at Essentiallysports.com. The Jets were targeting a safety in free agency. If you remember what I wrote, I said that the Jets basically met with every and any agent at the combine who was expected to have a safety that was going to hit the free agent market. They didn't wait for free agency. They traded Minka Fitzpatrick, who went from the Dolphins to the Steelers, back to the Dolphins. Now he's with the Jets. He signs a 3-year extension. So basically, what that means is right now at number two with the Jets, you're looking at either Arvell Reese or maybe David Bailey. In my recent two round mock yesterday, thankfully, I had the Jets taking Arvell Reese because of what I was hearing, that being the Jets were going to go very hard at safety in free agency.
In terms of your mock, um, again, the new mock, the 3.0 mock is up at essentiallysports.com. I saw that you got Ty Simpson going
Yep.
6 to the Browns.
Uh-huh.
And you've reported that they were doing a ton of work on Ty Simpson. You feel that strongly that they like what they saw that much to go 6.
I think it's a definite possibility. We're still early in the process here now that free agency's taken off, but it was reported before the combine that they had interest in Ty Simpson, and then I was told during the combine by the same people who told me that Daniel Jones and the Indianapolis Colts were light years away, that the Browns were doing an insane amount of work on Ty Simpson. I don't think Ty Simpson, is going to be there when the Browns second selection comes up. I believe it's number 24. So to be safe, I think they may take him early on. And remember, this is a new coach. This is a new general manager. So they're going to want their players in there.
I'm also gonna be interested to see um, how aggressive the Cowboys get with Trey Hendrickson now that they lost out on Crosby. That's gonna be fascinating for me to see.
Oh, they don't have to be real aggressive. They just got to offer him a nice big contract. And I was told the amount of money for Trey Hendrickson is going to be $20 to $25 million a year. So I think Trey Hendrickson would like to go to a place where he could win
Can win.
because,
Yeah.
like Maxx Crosby, he's finishing out his career. I think if the money's right and Trey Hendrickson is comfortable in Dallas and feels they have a shot there, they'll definitely make a big push towards him.
How about just the Jets quarterback situation in general right now, Tony? What are you hearing?
Well, I mean, obviously they're interested in everybody. If
Yeah.
you remember from the combine, I reported that the general manager likes Davis Mills with Houston and Tanner McKee with the Philadelphia Eagles. He'd have to trade for either of those. And then there was talk that they're interested in Tua. I'm told that the Jets are interested in Tua, but it's more hands off. It's not a real priority. There's talk about potentially Kyler Murray. Then Carson Wentz because of the connection with Frank Reich. And Carson Wentz is a free agent quarterback. He's basically going to hit them, or he's already hit the market. And then there's some late word that Geno Smith, who the Jets originally drafted into the Patriots, going to be cut by the Las Vegas Raiders, may come back to the Jets. The Jets are. It's very easy to bash the Jets, but I think this, to their credit, they're basically going to turn over every rock to find a quarterback. I think it's going to be more of a bridge quarterback. They
That
don't
was
want
my
to spend.
question. Yeah.
They
March to
don't want to.
Arch.
They don't want to spend a lot of money. And with Tua, with Kyler, with Geno, even with Carson Wentz, you're going to basically pay them close to league minimum because all but Wentz are going to be on their previous contracts with their other teams. So like they did, like I reported from safety. I'm sorry, when I reported from the combine that they were looking at every single safety available. I think now they're going to look at every quarterback available and then make their decision. Whatever it is, it's not a good situation for the Jets because none of these quarterbacks, in my opinion, unless they strike lightning in a bottle with Tanner McKee, is going to make them a real competitive team in 2026.
It would be fascinating to see Geno Smith come back, given what he dealt with the first time around.
Well, he wasn't. I mean, I think it was more coaching the first time around, and the lack of development. Yeah, Geno Smith is what he is. I think he's a very good backup quarterback. Geno Smith. He's a mature guy. He understands the league. I am kind of surprised bring Fernando Mendoza in. The Raiders wouldn't keep him around just as a mentor because he's very good in that capacity.
Yeah.
Uh, but again, whether it's Smith or Carson Wentz or Tua or Kyler Murray, it's more of a bridge quarterback unless somehow they hit lightning in a bottle, which they got to be careful of because that with Fitzgerald that year, who was led him to a 10-6 record, and he turned out to be the same Fitzgerald that we knew threw the ball all over the place the following season.
The you
Patrick,
know,
whatever his name.
yeah, Fitzpatrick, right? It's be interesting in terms of with Smith. It's like he must have said, "No, I'm not looking to be your mentor and your 2 game starter before you go to Mendoza."
I mean, I haven't heard that. Maybe it's a possibility. Maybe it's just the Clint Kubiak who wants to move on from
Just
Geno
wanted
Smith.
it fresh, yeah. But then you also hear the stuff that they don't want to play Mendoza right away. So like you said, the mentoring, they're gonna have someone to mentor him a little bit, someone to fill the first couple games anyway. All
I
right,
would assume that they're bringing a veteran quarterback.
yeah, absolutely. So the Kansas City trade, McDuffie to the Rams. And then McDuffie gets an epic bag, a historic bag. How does that affect round one for you?
Well, first thing is I think we got to look at why the Chiefs traded Trent McDuffie. And if you look at the Chiefs' history, they don't like paying defensive backs. I mean, as you mentioned, they trade Trent McDuffie to the Rams. They get a first round pick in return, and then McDuffie signs a historic deal with the Rams. Now the highest paid defensive back in the league. 2 years ago, when the Jarius Sneed, a very valuable player for the Chiefs, was up for contract extension, was making noise. They traded him to the Tennessee Titans, and he signed an extension with the Titans. The Chiefs just don't like paying defensive backs big money. How does this change the draft? Even with the signing of Kenneth Walker, I think the Chiefs with those 2 first-round picks are going to go offense. That ninth pick is either going to be an offensive lineman. I was told it's 50-50 they could go Kenyon Sadiq, even with Travis Kelce coming back. I mean,
Absolutely.
if Travis Kelce and Kenyon Sadiq there on the field, I mean, Pat Mahomes is going to love it. They like offensive linemen. I think Francis Mauigoa is going to be a consideration. And then with that second pick, you know, what they don't do if they take an offensive lineman in round one with that first selection, the number 9 pick, late in the first round, they'll look possibly receiver. If they go receiver, tight end with that first pick, I think that second pick, they'll look offensive line. I don't think they will address uh, the cornerback position until the second round, which is really, almost a late first round choice. And I think the name to keep an eye on is Trent Williams, because if the Niners cut Trent Williams, he could be on his way to the Chiefs.
The how the dominoes fall. It's going to be a fascinating 2 week stretch here for sure. Uh, Now we also have pro days
Yeah.
getting going in earnest this week. We had one pro day over the weekend that caught your eye.
Yeah, well, it was last week actually, the Navy Pro Day, and there were a couple of good performances. Eli Hendrick, the running back who actually catches the ball better than he carries the football, which is kind of a tough thing to do at Navy because they don't have a great passing attack. I mean, he only did wide receiver drills at Pro Day, and as I wrote about at Essentially Sports, people are looking at him now as a Julian Edelman type of receiver. Julian Edelman was the former option quarterback at Kent State, became an outstanding receiver and return specialist with the New England Patriots. That's what teams are looking to Eli Hendrick Heidenreich now.
More
Um,
of a slot guy.
yeah, because he doesn't have the size to play on the outside. I think the
Yeah, yeah.
interesting thing, if you watch the running back workouts at the combine, the running backs, the ball carriers did 2 running back drills, and the vast majority of the drills were pass catching drills. And that's what they did with Heidenreich, except he did no running back drills. Another takeaway that was very important that I wrote about is I was told that Heidenreich is one of the 5 athletes that Navy has basically branded or granted that he can defer his service in the Navy, which means that if a team drafts him and Heidenreich wants to play NFL football, to play Sunday football on this coming season, he has that option.
That's huge. That puts him right in the mix. Obviously.
Yeah.
All right, let's break into the scouts notebook. You've got some big doings on the big board.
Yep. A update on the big board was sent in on Sunday night. I would assume it'll be up sometime in the middle of this week. The big thing is 99% of the scouting reports for Big Ten players were input. So you'll have all the Ohio State players, Avril Reese, Carnell Tate, Caleb Downs, Caden McDonald, all the Penn State players, all the Oregon players, scouting reports on all those players. So now we'll have the only big conference that they don't have that their scouting reports remaining is the SEC. And of course, post combine, there were some changes. There are some guys who have moved up the draft board, not only because of the combine, because of film work and people I've spoke with, and I think none other than higher than Kenyon Sadiq, because I mean the guy had an Olympian type workout at the combine, and not only that is he got better as the season went on. He was a guy trying to turn from athlete to tight end in September and October. And then come November, December, he was just a devastating tight end, a downfield pass catcher. It seemed to click for Kenyon Sadiq on the field. You put those two things together, the combine workout, the film in November and December, and you look at his future. And I think Sadiq right now he's in the top 10 on my board. I think he's going to end up as a top 10 player in the draft.
What other players really stood out to you in terms of your biggest risers?
Colton Hood, the cornerback from Tennessee, who really took over the position as the Volunteers' number one cornerback after Jermod McCoy didn't play it down this year. Colton Hood, well traveled, played at Auburn, played at Colorado, had a good combine workout, 6 foot tall, 193 pounds, ran in the 4.4s, but his drills matched what I saw on tape. Good reverse, quick back pedal, smooth and explosive hip turn where he loses nothing in transition, turning to run with opponents downfield. And I think he's just hitting his stride, and there's a lot of upside. He's got the size, he's got the athleticism, he's shown the ball skills. Dylan Thieneman of Oregon, by way of Purdue, obviously ran the 4.35 at the combine, had a 41-inch vertical jump. Presently, he's number 35 on my draft board. Was in the 80s prior to this ranking. The thing with Dylan Thieneman is he's explosive, he's fast in a straight line, didn't run the shuttles. So I'm still kind of torn on whether or not he's going to be a traditional free safety or he's going to be just sort of a zone downhill type of safety. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, someone who I've criticized multiple times at Essentially Sports in articles and here on the podcast. I thought he was terrific at the combine. Ran a 4.52, which isn't the greatest time in the world, but there were some concerns he wasn't going to get under 4.6. And he did, and then he looked spectacular in the drills. So it's maybe a situation where Toledo didn't use him to his maximum in coverage, but you saw during the drills, which we didn't see at the Senior Bowl, you saw during the drills at the combine, he has that ability to be a traditional free safety. If not a free safety, a guy that you can place over the slot receiver, and he won't be a liability. One other defensive back, Treydon Stukes of Arizona. Is he a cornerback? Is he a safety? Is he both? Teams love his versatility. 4.33 in the 40, 1.50 10 split. He's coming off a terrific season. Treydon Stukes is probably, people will talk about Dylan Thieneman as they should, but Treydon Stukes is probably the fastest rising defensive back in the draft. Could go day 2 right now.
Any other risers you want to hit on?
2 offensive linemen, Blake Miller. Maybe this is my own sort of stubbornness on this.
Your want?
I never bought into Blake Miller as a top 60 pick. I've watched him for 3 years at Clemson play right tackle. I liked him. Came in a lot more athletic at the combine than I thought. 5.04 at the in the 40, 32-inch vertical jump. Did 32 reps on the bench with arms that were 34 and a quarter long. They're probably going to be much longer pro day. I think it's going to be closer to 34 and a half, 34 and 3/4 inches, 32 reps. That's a pretty good number. I think you're looking at second round with Blake Miller. Concern with Blake Miller is he ran a 5.04 in the 40, but he looked a little bit stiff during drills. So teams are going to have to figure that out. And Emil Wagner, talked about him, wrote about him a lot at Essentially Sports during Shrine Bowl practices. He was terrific, and he was just as athletic during combine workouts. 5.01 in the 40. You see Emil Wagner, he's got these arms that hang down, 34 and a quarter inches like Blake Miller, but I'm sure during Notre Dame Pro Day, they're going to be just a smidgen under 35 inches. And he's a guy that's got versatility. You want an athletic right tackle? You draft Emil Wagner. You want a guy, a college right tackle you think can play on the left side? Emil Wagner's another guy. So he's a guy who I think his play at the Shrine Bowl, his performance at the Combine has cemented him as a late day 2 selection.
You mentioned Blake Miller. Ton of opinions on Peter Woods. I'm just curious where you come down on Peter Woods after the combine.
Well, he didn't do anything at the combine, from what I remember. Yeah. He didn't test or anything. I mean, Peter Woods he's emblematic of what we saw a lot of at Clemson last year. A guy that was high expectations, but really didn't come through. He's a terrific athlete. He's explosive. They used him in the backfield and handed the ball off to him last year. I think he had 2 touchdowns. He's incredibly athletic. He's explosive. I mean, he penetrates the line of scrimmage. The production isn't there. So you got to wonder what the holdup is. Why isn't he turning this incredible athleticism into production, into on the field performance, the way Kenyon Sadiq is? I still think Peter Woods is going to go in the first round because defensive tackle is a priority position, and it's not a strong year at the spot. So I still think he's going to go first round. But a lot of people thought early on he was going to be a top 10 pick. Now you're looking at the bottom 10 of round one.
Seeing so much variance there, as high, still as high as top 15, but then others like you said, end of first round, solid day two guy. It, it's
Yeah,
it's it's crazy.
I think way some of the cornerbacks have performed, which is another priority position, that's going to push Peter Woods down a bit.
How about Fowler's in terms of the guys that slipped the most on your board?
Yeah, Keldrick Falk. I mean, Falk coming into the season was a potential top 5 pick. He was incredibly explosive. When you watch him on film, he's a disappointment. I mean, he makes some great flash plays, but then he disappears for long stretches. Was okay at the combine. So I think when you look at it, even scouts had Keldrick Falk as a potential top 5 pick coming into the season. Now you're looking at a guy at best is a mid first round selection. And the other guy is Cade McDonald. Didn't work out, didn't test, I should say, at the combine. Want to see what his testing numbers are. I mean, looked a little sloppy during position drills. He's the guy who I thought had the opportunity to firmly grasp that top position at the defensive tackle spot. The film is good. The film is impressive. Teams are going to have to figure out, what happened with Cade McDonald during the combine.
So much buzz around a lot of the Ohio State guys at the combine. He kind of he definitely lost some buzz.
And there's always a ton of guys at the from Ohio State at the combine to get a lot of talk. I mean, him and some people were concerned about the official 40 time of Cornell Tate. I wasn't one of them, but another guy that people came out of the combine with lower grades than before the event.
So check out all of the risers, the followers on the draft board at essentiallysports.com. You'll see it right there on the front page. And you'll see all, like Tony said, big updates sent over the weekend, big updates coming this week. All the latest Tony breakdowns and all the latest updates in terms of the risers and fallers. Check that out at essentiallysports.com, the NFL draft board. All right, Tony. Uh, one in terms of a look back segment this week. Um, you know, we get all excited about the top combine performers, and the buzz is still going strong on social media. Who are the top combine performers that turned out to be complete busts in the NFL for you?
Yeah, well, not just for me. I mean, the list is long, but I went with 4 guys. The first one would be Mike Mamula, a long time ago, 1995, coming out of Boston College at 250 pounds. He runs a 4.58 in the 40, which was as fast as most of the defensive backs. 38 and a half in the vertical jump, 26 reps on the bench. I got a 49 on the Wonderlic. I mean, that was like the greatest combine ever to date. So much so that Rich Kotite and the Philadelphia Eagles moved from the 12th pick to the 7th selection to ensure that they got Mike Mamula. They gave away a host of picks to move up. Mamula played 5 years in the league, never recorded double-digit sacks. So this guy who was an Olympian type athlete, as well as an Einstein type of professor doing the Wonderlic, turned out to be a complete bust. So Mike Mamula is near the top of the list. The next one would be Robert Gallery, the left tackle from Iowa. And I mean, this was somebody that completely fooled scouts because coming into his senior season of 2003, he was rated far and away the top prospect in the nation, the top overall prospect. 323 pounds in 2004. He ran a 4.98 in the 40, which is still a great time 21 years later for a 320-pound athlete. 30-inch vertical jump. He was the second selection of the draft by the Raiders. I don't even know if they were the LA Raiders at the time. You got to look that one up. He was a bust at right tackle. He was a bust at left tackle. He finally had a quasi decent career at guard. But in 2004, you weren't selecting players with the second pick of the draft to be guards. Had an
No.
8-year career. For the most part, never lived up to expectations. I'm going to break the hearts of New York Jet fans when I mention this name, Vernon Gholston of Ohio State. 266 pounds, ran a 4.58 in the 40, completed 37 reps on the bench, did a 42-inch vertical jump. I mean, this guy, get him in the Olympics, find a sport for him to play. Sixth pick by the Jets in 2006 it was. Played 3 years in the league, never recorded a single sack. One of the huge all-time busts. I remember talking to somebody at Ohio State about Vernon Gholston, and he said to me, he goes, Vernon was a guy who just seemed too interesting. Vernon was a guy who seemed like he was going to use the NFL to make a lot of money, and then when his career was over, he didn't care. He was just going to take his money and move on. Basically, it seemed like he really didn't love football, and the performances prove that. And then the final one would be Taylor Mays of USC, a hybrid safety linebacker, 230 pounds, ran a 4.43 in the 41-inch vertical jump. I remember covering this when I was at SI.com. I remember being on the phone like, hey, we got a great day, a great performance here. But the problem is he was great in a straight line. He struggled moving to his left and to his right. We saw that at the Senior Bowl that year. Was a second-round pick, 6-year career. He started 15 games. But for a 230-pound guy who runs in the low 4.4s, ran a great three-cone and a 41-inch vertical jump, he's the classic great athlete, average football player.
Yeah, those are four crazy names. And boy, yeah, being a New England guy, Mamula, he was the second in terms of the hype around him, the second coming of Doug Flutie, just in terms of pure hype, in terms of a New England guy, and boy, that just did not work out one iota. All right,
Great
it is.
by Rich Kotite.
What'd you say?
Another great draft selection by the one and only Rich Kotite.
Just now, was that? Where would you put that in terms of? Where do you put Golston in terms of just uh, the headaches for the Jets? Was that like the beginning of like the modern day uh, mistakes for the Jets, or
No,
just
no,
another in a line?
no. I mean, you go back to the '80s, Mike Hayton and
Oh yeah.
taking players like that, Kyle Brady over Warren Sapp and J.J. Stokes. So no, they were playing mistakes. Now, to the Jets' credit, I mean, with Rex Ryan and everything, the Jets did go to consecutive AFC title games post Vernon Gholston. So I don't know that it really had that huge of an impact as far as on the field. You don't want that to happen. Um, when you're drafting top 6, you don't want a bust like that. But it was a 2008 draft, 2008, 2009, 2010. The Jets did go to two back-to-back AFC title games. I said 2006. I'm mistaken. That was the Mark Sanchez draft. So they found ways to compensate, but it will still go down as one of the bigger busts in NFL history. And this was a time where, before the rookie salary cap, where these guys were making tons of money and first round picks weren't as expendable as they are now.
All right, Tony. Next up on the DraftCast, we bring a fellow draftnik into the conversation. She like you was one of the hardy ones to stick around for the offensive line day. Paige DeMacos, CEO of the Draft Network. Thrilled to bring you into the conversation. How are you?
I'm doing well. Obviously, Tony and I, OGs, you got to stick around for the big boys. That's what matters. And as jokingly said earlier. But if you care about fantasy football, you care about, the wide receiver day. If you care about real football, you care about offensive line day. So for those of us that live in real football reality, you got to stick around for the big boys.
And the irony is I know you go to the Senior Bowl every year, as I have for the past 26 years. The biggest crowds are in the pit around the
I
offensive
know.
lineman workout, as opposed to, say, watching the receivers workout. And it's kind of ironic come Sunday of the NFL Combine workouts. There's less than a half a dozen of us there watching the offensive linemen. So it's to your point about real football versus fantasy football.
Yeah,
Well,
Tony, but I think I was going to say jokingly on that point, like that's the difference between what the Senior Bowl means versus the Combine, right? You're talking real football versus the Underwear Olympics, right? And it's totally different ball games, and that's why I'm glad you said that, because the most NFL personnel you see all week long during the Senior Bowl, the most interest you see all week long is O-line versus D-line. And maybe it's time for the Combine to do something that matters a little bit more. I don't know what we got to do to fix the Combine, but there's plenty of issues there, issues to be addressed.
Well, and I'll also say something on the fantasy front. I've played in some leagues where we're tracking O linemen. I don't think it's gonna catch on wide, but man, it's fun. It gets real.
That's not for the faint of heart, Tim. You must be a real fantasy football player if that's what you're doing. Individual defense and individual offensive lineman is definitely the most skilled part of the fantasy football community.
Next level, yes, yeah. No, I'm a fantasy OG, so I've definitely tried just about everything to get as close to the real experience as possible. So speaking of the real experience, you specifically had a chance to talk with all of the quarterbacks. What did you come away from this quarterback class just in your conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed all the conversations I had. A lot of different personalities, different backgrounds, different schools, and different skill sets. Obviously, coming out of this class, and as all of us in this conversation are aware, every year it seems there's this big conversation around, oh, we're so excited about quarterbacks, so excited about quarterbacks, so excited about quarterbacks. Then we actually get to the draft process and we get down to it, and there's, oh, shockingly, only 2 or 3 guys that actually matter to the process. And this is something that happens every year. So I know everybody wants to talk about the 2027 class, but it's the same thing I heard about the 2026 class and the 2025, 24, 23, 22, and every class before that. So I think the part of this that I want to take out of the conversations I had were, Ty Simpson, I thought was a very interesting interview. He was very upfront and honest about the struggles that he had. And that's usually the part of this that I like to address with the players is, in the NFL, you're going to face adversity. We know that. It doesn't matter what team or what organization you end up in. And especially if you end up in a place that's really quarterback needy, you're going to end up in a position where you got to face adversity. And so how did they handle those things? To me, Ty Simpson is probably the person that will understand how to handle the NFL the best, because being an Alabama quarterback under Kalen DeBoer has not been very fun. It has been a nightmare, quite frankly. And that's not a reflection on the coaching staff. That's just a reflection on the people in this whole state of Alabama. It is very hard to meet the expectations and the pressure that is to be an Alabama quarterback. And he had pockets of time where we were looking at him as, wow, this could be the next guy. So yes, he doesn't have the amount of starts. Yes, he doesn't maybe necessarily have the, full body of tape. But if you watch Fernando Mendoza for the first few weeks of this season, he wasn't spectacular either. And that's the thing you got to know about these quarterbacks is you're going to have good, bad, and otherwise for each guy that comes out. It's about the situation that they're going to. And I think for me, when I look at Ty Simpson, I look at a kid who has handled a very tough situation in Alabama, and I think from a maturity standpoint can handle maybe some of the tougher markets that I know you guys are aware of, that it's not the same going to Chicago or New York as it is going to Arizona. The Kyler Murray situation, he's been in Arizona kind of in a bubble for a long time. he's about to get a harsh reality depending on where he goes and where he plays football next. So I think my biggest takeaway was I came away from my conversation that was 35 minutes with Ty Simpson going, yeah, this is a kid who gets it. He really gets it, and I think could be a special player at the next level.
So he was firm in his decision to enter the draft as opposed to, say, transferring to another school, despite the reports out there that he was being offered big money.
Yeah, to me, at least, he answered the question pretty emphatically, Tony, that was the first thing I wanted to see. Like, I wanted to see, did he look me in the eyes, right? Was he fidgeting? How did he answer the question? How did he follow up on the question? To me, that was the emphatic, yeah, I'm going. And it didn't seem to me that it was a question for him. And I think probably been blown out of proportion. I think people just like reporting all the money that's being offered, right? I think that's also, at this point, it's like, hey, well, this was reported and this was reported, and there's not really any way for any of us to really know if any of that happened, right? It's really easy hindsight to say, yeah, he was offered this amount of money. But does that mean that next year, coming into a really, what we said on paper is supposed to be a good quarterback class, right? Would that be a better option for him? I think he understands that he has an opportunity in this class where there is not a clear past Mendoza quarterback to really shine. And that's what I took away from the conversation.
At the same time, did you speak with Drew Allar?
I did speak to Drew. Drew's the interesting one in that when you see him, he's like, that's a quarterback, right? Like, I think of even of Mendoza, who I stood right next to, who I know is big, but doesn't look the same as Drew Allar, right? Just physically. So I hesitate to say that because I think that's what people get caught up in is they like, hey, he's a prototype guy. And we all know how that worked out for John Elway many, many drafts in a row where he was drafting prototypes and not actually good quarterbacks, right? I will say I'm intrigued by Drew Allar. I liked how he answered the questions. I like that he owned, and because he was out here for Fiesta Bowl, I've talked to Drew Allar quite a few times. So this is not the first time that I had an interaction with him. He doesn't shy away from any of the negativity, which I always want to hear these guys own, and it's the same the NFL does. They don't want you to pretend. They don't want you to lie to them. They want you to own up to what happened and just talk through it, right? That's what being a grown-up is. You got to own it. And that's, I think for him, was the part of this that I thought was very interesting. He obviously had a very tumultuous season. I was intrigued by my conversation with him. He was probably one of the more fun interviews that I had, just from like a personality standpoint. And I could see guys really kind of rallying around him is what I would say. He's a pretty vocal, fun guy to be around and definitely looks the part. I
mean, he's a guy to me that needs a change of scenery. In fact,
I agree.
Thought after the 2024 season, he should have stayed in college, but went to a different college. He should have transferred out of Penn State and turned out to be right. Was there any inclination on his behalf saying, if I could do it all over again, I may have gone to Miami or some other school rather than staying at Penn State?
So I asked the question and he kind of hemmed and hawed around it, right? But I think if I'm being honest, without saying, he didn't say it, but he said it without saying it, right? That I think he's probably in his own mind got to be thinking about, especially when you think about where he and Carson Beck were as far as evaluations, right? What we were looking at Carson Beck, who at Georgia had become a totally non-playable character at that point, right? And then transfers to Miami and becomes a guy that we're all looking at again. So I think if you just from the way he answered it and from his body language, I'm assuming that he kind of goes, yeah, what coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? And you can't blame him for that. I mean, Miami went to a national championship game, and from a skill set and from where he was coming out of that 24 year, he was way ahead of where Carson Beck was from an evaluation standpoint.
Let's talk about intrigue around the draft page. Obviously, the Maxx Crosby trade kind of shuffles things up a little bit in terms of who's picking and where things might go. Where does this draft really start to get intriguing for you?
I mean, how can it not get intriguing right away with the Jets, right? I mean, number 2. And to me, this is for people that actually really love the draft. When it is like this, it's way more interesting. It's
Absolutely.
Not chalk 1, 2, 3. We're not looking at a bunch of quarterbacks going, hey, we know this is an earn your money draft to me as far as general managers go. When it's not as obvious, when it is more driven around everything else besides quarterback, this is, hey, what general managers separate themselves from everybody else in the talent that they walk away from in this draft class? Because there is a lot of talent. And the New York Jets are a team that desperately are in need of a lot, right? And it seems that they are in that position quite often. But they are in a spot here where I look at them and go, okay, instead of trying to become the quarterback needy team again, go get the 2 best players at 2 and 16 that you guys can get, and then address quarterback somehow else. Or you're figuring it out later on. But to me, this is intriguing right off the mat because Kyler Murray gets dropped from the Arizona Cardinals. So now at 3, that's interesting. And 2, with the Jets. And the Jets are always intriguing because it's New York and it's the Jets, right? And they could always do something that just perplexes the mind. Could they take a quarterback at 2? Who knows? Would any of us be surprised? I sure wouldn't be. This is how this goes year in and year out. So I'm excited about this draft because I think there's a lot of question marks.
I would agree with you. The fun starts at 2. I think some of those questions were answered this morning when the Jets traded for Minka Fitzpatrick, which I think that means Caleb Downs is knocked off the board. Now, you are in Arizona, correct?
I am.
So what's your feeling on the Cardinals? I mean, would they take a Jeremiah Love at number 3, especially now that they brought in an offensive guy as a coach? Are they looking defense? Would they reach for one of the offensive tackles at 3, considering, the desperate need they have on the right side?
I think I could see them reaching for an offensive tackle there at 3, Tony, depending on who goes at 2, right? I think now you bring the interesting part of this conversation into play in that Caleb Downs doesn't go to, do they go there at 3? Do they want to take a best player available? This is going to be a very interesting draft for this kind of new regime because you've got obviously Monty Austinford who made it through this, but then you're bringing in a new staff with LaFleur, and what is his kind of makeshift staff? And that's what I'm going to call it because that's how it was put together. This was a staff that was kind of thrown together. They were towards the end of this hiring class. They don't really have a feel or a chemistry yet built up together. They got guys from college that they brought in. This is going to be very interesting here in Arizona. And then obviously moving on from Kyler, I think they could end up going offensive tackle there just because it has been a long time since they've been able to protect the quarterback. I'm talking back to my days with Bruce Arians that they actually had a good offensive line. So it's been a minute since they've had a very consistent offensive line. And as we've all discussed, I think, and we kind of alluded to at the beginning of the show, if you don't have an offensive line, it doesn't matter who you have at the quarterback. And I think that's the part of this that maybe the Cardinals are finally starting to realize that they really need to protect whoever it is. Doesn't matter that it's not going to be Kyler Murray moving forward.
Let me ask you, just staying on the theme of offensive tackle and the state of Arizona, for the past 2 years, I've loved Max Crosby, and he's basically checked every box this year. He's good as a senior, terrific at the Senior Bowl, outstanding at the Combine. You think they would do something where they may, wait till the second round to get a guy like Anako, who I feel would fit their needs, or maybe even trade up into the back part of round 1 if they feel he's slipping away and they needed him?
I think I'm glad you brought him up because he's I actually talked to Drew Fabianic this morning about him just because he's been such a spectacular player and he's almost still under the radar, which feels bizarre because of how good he was and checks every box. When I was at Senior Bowl and I talked to all the defensive linemen, I asked 15 of them who was the toughest guy to go against all week. And every single one, 15 of 15, said it was Max. That is insane. He was so good in those one-on-ones. He was so good all week long, and he's been so consistent. So I think, one, if I know anything about this market, I know Michael Bidwell very well, and he loves a homegrown storyline, a homegrown narrative, a ASU kid that stays here and plays for the Arizona Cardinals. I could see them trading back into the first round to get him because I don't know if he ends up slipping then to the second round. So I like that. Obviously 3 would be a really, really rich to go that early. But the end of the first round, the beginning of the second round, that's the sweet spot for them. And that would be if they could walk away with getting a guy like a Caleb Downs or a spectacular defensive player at number 3 and then come back and walk away with Maxx, that would be a really good 1-2 to walk away from this draft on. And I think that would make Arizona Cardinal fans really happy.
So it sounds, getting the vibe from you, the sense from you, Jeremiah Love is not in the conversation at 3.
I've talked to the Cardinals, and I don't sense that 3 is the spot. The thing is, we know, to me, Jeremiah Love's the best player in this draft class. So I don't think there would be any hesitation if I was going into this, but I understand that the running back position specifically for them at 3, they kind of have to have a sure thing as much as possible. And they don't have an opportunity to watch what happened to a first-round running back, obviously this year with the Raiders, right? And what happened I think that is going to scare teams, no matter if that's fair or not, because if you don't have a good all-line, as we've talked about, it doesn't matter about your running back and your quarterback. You as much as Jeremiah Love is a spectacular player, I think they would be scared to make that risk. And I don't see him going to the Cardinals at 3 based off of the conversations I've had thus far.
It's interesting with Love, with a lot of the mocks have him going to the Saints. A lot of what you hear out of New Orleans is the Saints want him. So it's one of those things where that feels like the marriage, unless somebody else jumps into the conversation. Is there one pick for you that you just look into the camera and like you said, this is a earn your money GM draft? Is there one pick here where you look into the camera and you say to a GM, you must make this pick?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, to me, the player that I walked away most impressed with, and it was less to do with what you saw at the combine and more to do with the consistency of the tape, and that's Sonny Styles. To me, I don't understand not wanting to just lock that in from a perspective of what you saw all year long, from what you saw from his leadership. And we have him in our latest mock going to the Commanders. And I think when you talk about the Commanders and them needing a captain of their defense, a type of guy from a leadership perspective and football IQ perspective, this team needs a lot. They got duped into, much like the Patriots this year, where you had a soft schedule that led to more success than necessary is where your roster is. They got to come out of this draft with a surefire home run. So to me, at 7 with the Commanders, if you don't come out with somebody who is a superstar, this is going to be a really tough year for the Washington Commanders because they cannot run it back with that roster. That roster was depleted. They got duped into thinking that Jaden Daniels was going to continue to play at the clip he played at and continue to stay healthy when the style of play he has really lends itself to being not a guy who makes it through an entire season uninjured. They got to walk away with a guy, a dude. And to me, that's a guy like Sonny Styles that's a dude that you would feel really, really comfortable kind of being the captain of your defense.
And everything went right. Everything went right for the Commanders that year. Just like the Patriots this year. The health was, and just like the Commanders this year with the health, everything that could go wrong, went wrong. So like you said, you got to get it right. You really need that home run.
Yeah, that's funny. I want to say great minds think alike, but my 2-round mock draft from Essentially Sports is up. And at number 7, I do have the Washington Commanders taking Sonny Styles. So it's good to know. Now, you speak about dudes. How high do you think Kenyon Sadiq goes? Not just based on his combine workout, which was great, but he was a much better tight end in November and December than he was in September and October.
Tony, you and I are in lockstep in the guys that we really like. Because Kenyon Sadiq coming into the combine, I'm out here in Phoenix, so I watched him work out at Exos for the 6 weeks leading up to the combine. And there's doing the combine well, and then there's doing what he did. He is so fluid as an athlete. He makes everything look easy. And that's when you're watching somebody and their movement is the way that his movement is. he's literally, I hate saying a freak, but he is an athletic freak. He really is. And everything he did, he would come to the sideline, and after they have this big football field called Reach 11 here in Arizona where they do the pre-combine testing. And he came off to the side, and he wasn't even breathing heavy. And that's so frustrating to watch. You're like, dude, are you even really trying? And you just are running fast and jumping so high. And then you watch his tape, and I'm glad you said what you said, Tony, because his November tape was really good, and he got better when it mattered, and the weather got colder, and it was tougher, and it was more grimy. And his quarterback play wasn't as good too. Dante Moore had some tough games in that stretch as well, and he was really spectacular. One of the coaches that I talk to the most in college football is Dan Lanning, and he's also one of the guys I really respect the most. And he's very honest in how he talks about his football players. I don't remember him being this excited about a player, right? And I really like Terrence Ferguson, who came out of Oregon as well, who's been a really good piece for the Rams. But you're talking about apples and oranges here from a physical standpoint, from what he can do, and quite frankly, what his ceiling is. So I love Kenyon Sadiq. I would be really excited to add him. And if you watched what happened this year for the Chicago Bears, right, or for the Indianapolis Colts, and how big of an impact, honestly, even dating back to what the Raiders have done with their tight ends and how good and how big of an impact these guys are making right away, this is a position that is no longer a luxury position. This is a position that has to come in and play well right away, because you've seen guys like Colson Loveland and Tyler Warren come in. And Kenyon Sadiq, to me, is the obvious next dude when you talk about tight ends.
So how high you think he can go?
I mean, in the first round, for sure, obviously. To me, that's obviously when you're talking about now, the Raiders would never take another tight end. But if you're in the back end of the first round and you potentially want to come up and grab a guy like this, I would take him in the 20s. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't feel comfortable. You had what? Colson Loveland went 10 last year. So Tyler Warren went what? I mean, 16. I don't think there's not really a too high to me when you're talking about, hey, you need a dude. And there are guys that are guys that I don't worry about. Kenyon Sadiq's one of those guys. I'm not worried about him. So if you're scared off by what I want to call it, Kyle Pitts, I would be this is not the same player. Not the same player, and you're also not talking about in the top 5. So I would say in the mid, maybe the teens. We'll see how high he can go, but yeah, he was a freak. He's athletically so spectacular.
That whole window at 8 to 11 too is all teams that could jump there as well.
Yep.
So
the Bengals could really use a guy that obviously can block and can help that offense. I know obviously they want to add to that offensive line, but I just don't see a lineman that they want to take at 10 with that early, right? I mean, that's a tough sell right there. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to see. We all know if Jeremiah Love slips to 9 with the Kansas City Chiefs, that's over with. You can just mail that card in. They're gonna say yes to that. But I could see, and that's a good stretch. 8 to 11 feels about right, and there's a couple of teams in there that are very interesting.
Absolutely. All right. Before we let you go, Paige, tell us what's coming up with the Draft Network. Obviously, this is the prime time. What do you guys got coming up?
Yeah, going to be at some pro days over the next couple of weeks. That's the next and the final checkpoint. As we all know, we've got free agency going on this week, and then we've got pro days over the next few weeks. And especially given how few guys ran their 40s and some of these boxes that we still have to check at these pro days, I do like to go myself to the pro days and see firsthand, especially with a couple of these guys, who's going to run, who's not, what are they doing, what are the, it is a glorified touch point again, but at least there's some football that goes on most of the time. So that's the next couple of weeks. And then really excited about Pittsburgh. Honestly, Pittsburgh, I think, is going to have just be a spectacular draft city. The way that the NFL has the plans between the north side, the North Shore, and the stadium and the river, and how much of
the
it.
Park.
I mean, I really think, I mean, it just the NFL continues to make this Coachella for football fans, and that's what this is going to be. I think it's going to be one of the more fun over the last few. I've been at every draft since 2019. I'm most excited for this one. It's a city I haven't been to, which is rare because I've pretty much been everywhere in the United States, but I'm really excited to go to Pittsburgh and really excited to be out there all week long.
Long gone are the days when it used to be in New York City at Radio City and the Marriott Marquis and people lining up the night before. But New York City's got nobody to blame for it but themselves. That's
exactly. All right, we could go. This is a topic we could go. You mentioned it out of the gate. Before I let you go, the combine. What is if you were running the combine? What's the one thing above anything else that you would fix about the combine?
Oh, I would do what Drew's trying to do at the Senior Bowl. If you're going to show up, you're going to do a certain amount of things that we agreed to ahead of time. I think that's just got to be what the NFL gets to at some point. And I'm not saying you got to do everything, but maybe we pare down what actually matters to each position group and make it make sense. Because I think the more guys, this is a reflection of the fact you've got an NFL office, league office, and then you've got 32 individual teams, and they operate completely separately of each other. And when the league office makes decisions, they make decisions for themselves, and it doesn't reflect what the 32 teams actually want. And they want the combine to continue to become an event. And unfortunately, the more guys opt out of things, doesn't matter that they're there to do their interviews for the NFL. They're trying to make this a fan event. And this is, when you've got guys that are opting out of things, big name players, it's going to continue to be a problem. So you got to get guys in there. You got to get them committed to what they're going to do. And I really like what Drew and down at the Senior Bowl has done, which is like, hey, listen, you're going to show up, you're going to play in the game. You're going to be here all week long. You got to do the things that you say you're going to do. And in a commitment in a society where we're doing less and less of what we actually say we're going to do, we're changing schools and doing everything. And listen, that's a whole nother topic of conversation and fixing the NCAA. But I think we've got to first and foremost just say, hey, these are the things you got to do while you're out here. And unless you're injured, you got to commit to it. And that's it.
Paige DeMacos, CEO of the Draft Network, huge thank you for joining us here on the ES DraftCast, and good luck with the coverage right up through Pittsburgh.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Tony, what'd you make of the interview with Paige?
It's ironic because I've seen Paige for years at the Senior Bowl. I occasionally see her at the Combine. I've never really spoken to her. And in that interview for about 15, 20 minutes, it's like she's like my sister from a different mother. It's unbelievable. I couldn't agree more with her. And I've said this all along about people who are projecting to take their quarterback next year. There's already this march for Arch in New York for Arch Manning, who's nice quarterback. He's not a franchise quarterback. If his last name was Arch Thompson, they wouldn't be doing this. But there's already this talk in New York, we'll get our quarterback in 2027. And what she said about 2026 and 2026 draft, 2025 draft at the quarterback position is so right on, because this draft was supposed to be Arch Manning and Lenora Sellers and Cade Klubnik.
You've been saying it all along. It's like we're kicking the can down the road. Yeah.
And they've all bombed. And I mean, last year it was supposed to be Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers and Shedeur Sanders and Jalen Milroe. So you got to be careful about saying we'll get our quarterback next year because next year looks like a good quarterback. Because based on recent history, it never pans out. And the other thing that I couldn't agree with her more about, and we've talked about it in the podcast, talked about it for years now, is really how, the Combine used to be just a great scouting event. And now it's a commercialized, marketed event for the NFL where they want to make it a big media event and they want to make it a big fan fest and everything. And the two really don't mesh. And I think that's why there's kind of problems. And we talked about last podcast, the changes that are expected to come to the Combine with the workouts happening first before the physical exams, the 3 days of medical exams and the interviews and some of the player activities ending at 8 p.m. at night. I think that's going to make it more appetizing, more attractive for players to go there and work out amongst the mayhem of what we see the past 10 years or so at the combine.
I almost felt like you were trying to ask her, each player, trying to get almost an opposing view, but she kept coming. She kept coming right into your wheelhouse.
Yeah, it was scary. It was scary. My gosh.
That was great. That was great. Well, huge thank you to Paige for joining us, and big weeks ahead in terms of the Draft Network and all the draft activity. The news keeps coming fast and furious. Coming out of our interview, we're hearing Malik Willis is going to the Dolphins.
Yeah. Interesting in that that was the place that he was originally rumored to go, and I had written an article on Essentially Sports saying that they weren't sure Miami was going to have enough money to sign Malik Willis, and the thought process was he was going to end up in Arizona. Obviously, I was wrong. I'm going to be interested to see what the contract was, how much Willis got from the Dolphins. I mean, they were talking about outrageous numbers, $30 to $40 million a year. I've not seen any figures, but the initial word that Willis was favored to go with the Miami Dolphins turned out to be true.
I mean, is that pretty much does the Fitzpatrick move pretty much free up the money for them to be able to make that?
We'll find out. I mean,
Yeah.
I really don't know. I think it's more, the salary cap hit that they're going to take from Tua, which is why people thought that
There
Miami
just
wouldn't have the
wasn't
money.
any. Yeah.
Obviously, the Minka Fitzpatrick trade probably helped facilitate the signing of or enabled the signing of Malik Willis.
Crazy days. So that's one off of the QB carousel. All right, Stefon Diggs, Tony. That was up in my corner of the universe. Money wise, maybe not so much of a surprise, but just in terms of wanting to keep some stability. I know that obviously they were all in on Pierce, and that's not going to happen now. So, uh, what's Diggs' future after the Patriots here?
Well, I mean, there's rumors about him going on to the Pittsburgh Steelers with Aaron Rodgers. I think Rodgers is somebody that could keep him in check. Obviously, the Steelers are desperately need receivers. There's been some talk about possibly the Denver Broncos, who need a deep threat, a receiver that can take the top off the offense. They do want a receiver in the offseason, so I would keep an eye on those two teams.
Baltimore would seem like a fit too. I haven't heard a whole lot there.
Just as long as you can coexist with Lamar Jackson, I think that would make sense.
Absolutely. Do you think the Bills, after this DJ Moore move, do you think the Bills, there was talk of the Bills with Alec Pierce as well. I mean, where do the Bills go on wide receiver now after the Moore move?
Well, I didn't hear about the Bills with Alec Pierce. I did hear about the Bills with Mike Evans, and I know that
Yes.
Mike Evans' team were shocked when the Bills made that move to trade for DJ Moore, because it seemed to me, the sense I got from speaking with them, was that bags were packed, ready to go to Buffalo. To answer the question, yes, the Bills will definitely add another receiver, either via free agency, potentially in the draft. Obviously they got to figure out moving on from Keon Coleman, what they're going to do with that situation. I think, we talked about Alec Pierce earlier. As I said last week, he was the first domino to fall, and he got a lot of money. And whether it's Mike Evans, whether it's Wan'Dale Robinson, whether it's Romeo Doubs, those guys are going to be beneficiaries of the Alec Pierce signing, because he has now set the market. I think with the Bills and maybe a guy like Mike Evans or even Romeo Doubs, what can you pay him? Because now Mike Evans is probably going to want something in the range of $20 to $22 million a year. Whether that's the Buffalo Bills, whether that's the Las Vegas Raiders, whether that's the Tennessee Titans, you're going to have the money and be willing to, write out that check to Mike Evans.
I have to I have to throw up the red flag there on Evans just in terms of durability, whether he's going to be worth it. But I'll certainly love his production when he's on the field
Yeah, I mean, I think his veteran leadership is also important as well.
for sure. Breaking news: Cam Newton says that the current draft class lacks star power. that's
I
that's
mean,
that is that's news to us, right? Yeah.
I mean, I think he's late to the party with that, but keep it on that watch. The ESPN's always on in my gym in the morning. I like those hats that he wears. Uh, you know, uh, nothing new there.
No, nothing. We haven't been saying for weeks, months here, right?
Correct.
And then a sad passing this week. Uh, just want to give a shout out to Lou Holtz, uh, phenomenal coach, but even more so, just a phenomenal ambassador for the game.
Yeah. I mean, he was a great coach. He was a terrible coach with the New York Jets. People
Yeah,
tend to forget that he was he coached in the NFL with the Jets for a while. Didn't even last a season. Great coach at Notre Dame. Really brought that program back to prominence. Did it his way. I'm sure. I'm sure the vast majority of this audience has watched the 30 for 30 Catholics versus Convicts, which is just an incredible documentary
it
on that
really
game.
is.
Had great success at Notre Dame. Probably stretched it a little bit too far when he was at South Carolina. I thought he was a great analyst. I thought he was a fun guy to listen to. Like you said, he was an ambassador. I saw multiple interviews with him. I remember one of the funniest interviews I ever saw with Jerome Bettis. He may have been on David Letterman, but with Lou Holtz, and it was about Jerome Bettis. And I think it was on David Letterman. And evidently, Lou Holtz called Jerome Bettis. He said and said to him, he goes, somebody's out there impersonating you. He goes, what are you talking about? He goes, I'm watching this guy wearing number 38 or whatever with the Pittsburgh Steeler jersey. He goes, that can't be you the way you're playing. And he said, Bettis hung up the phone on him. He was so angry. But it's he will go down in history and Notre Dame lore, which we've seen, great college coaches. And yeah, it was sad. He was a fun guy to listen to.
Absolutely. So, rest in peace, Lou Holtz. In terms of, uh, is there a franchise? If I gave you 60 seconds to fix a franchise, Tony,
Mm.
is there one franchise that stands out to you that you could summarize in 60 seconds?
About a year ago, when I was writing for a different organization, I had written about the New York Jets, and I said the way to fix the Jets is the Johnsons go to Howie Roseman of the Philadelphia Eagles, and they say we will give you 10% equity in the ball club. Take it over, run it, and we'll move all of our stuff out of Florham Park. Obviously, the idea must have been really good because the New York Post picked it up and ran with the idea. They did give me credit. But that's the situation with the New York Jets. They've got to get a Howie Roseman type guy, and Howie Roseman evidently wanted to work for the New York Jets early on before he got a job with the Eagles as an intern, and Mike Tannenbaum turned him down. So people say, well, it'd be tough to pry Howie Roseman away from Philadelphia. He may have an axe to grind. He may want to come back and give the old, F you to Mike Tannenbaum, say, see, you should have hired me way back when, and do that. But that would be reliant on the Johnsons willing to offer a real lot and willing to get out of the building at Florham Park.
Neither one of those seem very likely, do they?
Well, no. But if the Johnsons, listen, the New York Jets were a terrible organization. I talked about Rich Kotite earlier. The way they turned it around was Leon Hess stepped to the podium, pried Bill Parcells away from the New England Patriots, and said to the world, Bill Parcells take over. And the Jets turned on a dime for the better after being just a horrid organization. That's what it's going to take. The Johnson brothers have to have a Leon Hess type of awakening and let somebody else run the franchise. If they're serious about winning, it'll happen. If not, they're going to be changing general managers and coaches, every 2 years.
Been on the cusp of things happening and players and hype and Rogers and all. I've been on the cusp of feeling like something was turning, and it just won't turn.
Uh, at face value, yes, but even and I'm here in New York, and I remember the hysteria when Aaron Rodgers came, and everybody was so excited, and people were just thought the Jets are going to the Super Bowl. The problem was they did nothing to address the offensive line, and I kind of laughed, because it's star players, but it's one position. They never really did. They've never really done it as an organization, the way they did with when Rex Ryan was here, when they had a really good defense, they had a terrific offensive line, they had a good running game, and they had a competent quarterback. They don't have really any of that right now.
God bless the Jets. Hopefully it happens in the next couple of years. And everybody's like, you don't mean that. You're a Patriots fan. Listen, the Jets, just like basketball, the Knicks being good is good for the league. The Jets and the Giants being good is good for the NFL. You get your big market teams in the mix. It's good for business.
I'm sure the league would like the Jets and or the Giants, as well as the Dallas Cowboys,
Yes.
uh, to really get back into it. One more piece of breaking news that I actually wrote about at the combine: Demario Davis signed a 2-year deal with the New York Jets. So if you had been with us during the combine, uh, because I knew that they were moving. Alex Anzalone was going to be tougher to sign, because there was a market developing for him at the combine. The Jets were turning their sights to Demario Davis, and it was just announced that the Jets signed a 2-year deal with Demario Davis.
And Jaelan Phillips is headed from the Eagles to the Panthers.
Yep, which is major
Ugh.
because that is a massive need for the Panthers, which they
Yeah.
just filled in free agency, so they could look elsewhere in the early part of the draft.
Jeez. Things happening, man. Uh Pittman traded to the Steelers. Michael Pittman Jr.
Well, I mean, they got Pierce back. Obviously, they're going to want to add another receiver, but as we've talked about constantly, the Steelers have a desperate need at the receiver position. I think Pittman is a perfect complement to DK Metcalf, more of an underneath receiver, better route runner. Again, this will give him options once the draft comes around.
That's a under the radar thing. I hadn't heard anything, but it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, well, because now with that contract that they gave to Pierce, you and Pittman, being a high priced receiver, you're gonna have so much money locked up at one position. You got to spread it around, especially since they still have to bring Daniel Jones back into the mix,
That's going to open up about $24 million in cap space for him. Absolutely.
which is gonna go to the quarterback.
Yep. All right, let's crack open the mailbag this week, Tony. Let's start with the Browns. What can the Browns do in free agency after Deshaun Watson's restructuring?
Never mind the fact that they lost out on Malik Willis, who's now going to be playing with the Miami Dolphins, and that was a quarterback of interest. You got to remember the Browns. This is a new coach. This is a new general manager. I'm sure they're going to give Deshaun Watson, who we talk about massive busts in the NFL draft. That was a massive bust of a trade for the Browns. They'll give him an option, and as I reported from the combine, they seem to have a lot of interest in one Ty Simpson. So, how early are they willing to go to maybe draft Ty Simpson?
It's going to be curious to see what that QB room looks like this summer for sure. All right, Nick Saban expressed his concerns about the transfer portal at the White House College Sports Summit. Would NFL GMs agree with Saban that moving around stunts a player's growth?
Well, it's always been known that when you're going from system to system to system, it doesn't help the player. I mean, Fernando Mendoza was one example. Fernando Mendoza, I was told that Cal had so many offensive coordinators he could never get into a groove. Finally got into a groove at Indiana. So yes, when you're going, whether you are voluntarily going from one school to another school, or the school that you're at is consistently changing coordinators or systems, it absolutely, puts a player behind the eight ball and does not help foster his development as a complete prospect. But the lure of the huge NIL deal is bigger than worrying about your development moving forward.
Could the Steelers draft a quarterback earlier than expected?
I mean, could they draft Ty Simpson? I think so. Could they draft, like a Cole Payton in round 3 as a developmental guy? I think that's a possibility. At some point in time, they're going to have to address the quarterback need of the future.
Do you feel like it's that Ty Simpson is going to become almost a fight between the Browns and the Steelers? Do you feel like the Steelers are going to get pulled into that because of the Browns' interest?
No, I mean, except for the head coach, I mean, the same people who are primarily making the football decisions are the same. I don't know that. I think that Mike McCarthy wants to add players in the draft that are going to help him in 2026 versus 2027, 2028. So that hasn't been the Steelers' their MO.
Last question out of the mailbag this week. What's the ideal draft strategy for the Chargers around Justin Herbert?
Around him or in front of him? I mean, they cut the Bradley Bozeman, the center, who did not play well last year, announced his retirement, and as expected, the word is out they're going to cut Mekhi Becton, which I initially reported from Essentially Sports when I was at the Shrine Bowl. So, and then they have 2 offensive tackles that are coming back from season-ending injuries. So, obviously they got to get that offensive line in unison. They got to add some more pieces to the interior of the offensive line. They got to get their offensive tackles healthy. That is primary. And that, Jim Harbaugh is a guy who prided himself in college at Michigan on big dominating, game controlling offensive lines. So I think more than anything else, they got to get that offensive line in sync. It looks like they hit a grand slam with Oronde Gadsden. Paige was talking about how the tight end position is no longer a luxury. They did a great job last year in the 5th round with Oronde Gadsden. They got some good receivers there, but they got to protect Justin Herbert.
Oh, absolutely. Got to keep him up. All right. Another huge week on the DraftCast. Again, huge thanks to Paige DeMacos from the Draft Network for joining us. Check us out on wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on the YouTube channel. Please keep those questions coming for the mailbag. And we will catch you next week here on the Essentially Sports DraftCast with Mr. Tony Pauline.